Well, we made it to Friday, folks. It's Friday here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and you know what that means. It's time for the mailbag where we take your questions, or take questions from the Pitt fans at Panther-Lair.com on the Between Fifth and Forbes message board all week long. They've been posting questions, and we aim to answer as many as we can here on the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We got great questions this week, as we do every week. Questions about Eli Holstein, questions about the ACC, questions about NIL, questions about everything, and we cover it all right here on the Morning Pitt Mailbag. So no need to delay. Might as well jump right into it. It's the Morning Pitt, the Friday edition, the Mailbag edition here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, the Morning Pitt Mailbag here on the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what we always ask you to do? Like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content, these daily Morning Pitt videos, which sometimes might be the only Pitt podcast or video content you get each day. So you want to take advantage of that and enjoy these every morning, or hopefully just check them out. I don't know if you're going to enjoy them or not, but hopefully they give you a little bit of Pitt conversation to get your day started, some topics to think about, some things to discuss as we move through the whole year, really. I mean, we do it through the football season, basketball season, through the spring, and even into the summer here, where we have lots of, we search for things to talk about, but I think we tend to come up with some interesting topics and interesting conversation pieces. And look, we're inside of like 2 weeks until the start of training camp anyway, so that's coming up real fast. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to not miss any of our Pitt video content. We have the live show that we do every Wednesday night. We have press conferences, post-game shows, interviews, all those things right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And don't forget the website, Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Pitt football, basketball, recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and everything you need to know about Pitt sports, it's right there, Panther-Lair.com, and the message boards to talk with other Pitt fans. Like, if you're a Pitt fan and you're looking for Pitt conversation, Pitt information, Pitt coverage, Pitt content, Pitt discourse, and you want to interact with other Pitt fans, I don't think there's a better place you're going to find than Panther-Lair.com. It's the Pitt site on the 24/7 Sports Network. And I think if you're a Pitt fan looking for Pitt info or Pitt discussion, that's the best place to find it. Panther-Lair.com. Let's jump into some questions. We had a couple left over from last week, so we'll start there. Left Coast Panther wants to know, why would Pat Narduzzi gamble on not bringing in a bigger back to spell Desmond Reed? Pat doesn't seem to be in a position where it's okay to gamble with his seat being a little bit warmer. It's an interesting question. It's one I've gone back and forth about. On Wednesday night on the live show, Jim and I talked about the running back situation a little bit. Should they have brought in another running back? Are they okay with what they've got? I mean, obviously they're okay with what they've got because they didn't really push all that hard to get a transfer running back. And so that means that the 6 scholarship backs they have on roster, they feel like that's a good group, with Desmond Reed. Like, the list is Desmond Reed, Derek Davis, Juelz Goff as returning players, and then 3 incoming freshmen, Saquon Smith, Jalen Brown, and Ja'Karian Turner. Turner being the guy who enrolled in January. And so clearly in December, and again in the spring, the 2 portal windows, the Pitt coaches looked at the situation at running back and said, we feel okay with Reed, Davis, Goff, Brown, Smith, and Turner. We think we'll be okay with that group. Now, there's some caveats in there, right? I mean, there's some little details that you need to add. I mean, Desmond Reed is great. I mean, set him aside for a second, even if there are questions about his durability, but I think he answered a lot of those last year. I mean, yeah, he got hurt, he got banged up, but running backs get hurt and get banged up. He still played a whole lot last season, carried the ball a ton, caught a lot of passes, had more than 200 offensive touches. I mean, I think Desmond Reed convinced the coaches that he's durable enough, and he more or less convinced me that he's durable enough. Running backs are going to get banged up. It happens. But I think Desmond Reed is up to the task of a full workload. But Derek Davis, who knows? He got hurt late in the season last year. When's he going to be available? Juelz Goff looked good, but only carried the ball like 12 times last year. He was a true freshman last year. He's a redshirt freshman this year with a minimal amount of experience. And then you have 3 true freshmen. So even if you feel like that group is talented enough, and on the surface, yeah, Desmond Reed is great. Juelz Goff looks really promising. Derek Davis was a former 4-star guy. Should be good enough to be your number 2 or number 3 running back. These 3 freshmen all look really intriguing. Speed and with Turner and Smith, and then a bigger back with Brown. On the surface, on paper, it all seems like it's perfectly good. full room. But I think all those little caveats about those guys raise some questions, and legitimate questions. But again, and Jim made this point on Wednesday night on the live show, like the Pitt coaches knew those questions existed. The Pitt coaches clearly feel like they've got answers to those questions because they didn't really pursue a transfer running back. And there were plenty of guys available. They could have found one if they wanted one or needed one, and they didn't. So I think you're going to go into this season with Desmond Reed as your number 1, Juelz Goff as your number 2, and then probably Ja'Kirian Turner as your number 3, at least to start the season, if not for the full season, depending on when Derek Davis comes back. Now, I think they're really optimistic about Ja'Kirian Turner. I think he had a really good spring camp. He impressed the coaches a lot, so maybe they feel confident that he can, do the work of a third running back. But, it does feel like you're one injury away, especially if that injury is to to Desmond Reed, You're one injury away from being in a really tricky situation. And it's another thing that came up on Wednesday night. Somebody said, which player would be the most detrimental if they lost him this season? And Jim mentioned Desmond Reed. And I thought that's a really good answer because you don't really know what they have behind him. Even Derek Davis, who's like a redshirt senior this year, redshirt senior. You don't know what you have in him. He's played a small amount over the past few years. Last year he had 27 carries for 70 yards. He averaged less than 3 yards per carry and scored 2 rushing touchdowns. I think he had that game winner against West Virginia, right? And he caught 3 passes for 15 yards. And I mean, that's about it. He had some playing time in a bowl game at LSU against Purdue or somebody like that. There's just not a lot to go on. There's not a lot to go on with Juelz Goff. It's a pretty, and then it's 3 true freshmen, guys who obviously haven't played. So there's a pretty big drop off there. I mean, Desmond Reed, in addition to maybe being the best overall player on the team and no worse than number 2 in that category, is probably the most valuable player and the one they could least afford to lose because of the situation at his position. So it's tricky. I have the same question you do. Why not go out and get a transfer? And maybe a transfer looks in and says, well, I don't know, coach, you got 6 scholarship running backs. So where am I going to fit in? I think you could easily talk your way out of that and say, well, there's Desmond Reed. You're probably going to be behind him, but everybody else is either hurt or a freshman or a redshirt freshman. So you can find some playing time there. But clearly they didn't feel like it was a necessity. And they didn't go after him. So I guess they like the situation. Maybe a little better than you and I do. They just need Desmond Reed to stay healthy. They'll be all right. Richard 2928 asked this last week, says, as far as the wide receiver position, do you think one of the freshmen might be able to step up and be in the rotation? If so, who would you predict to be that wide receiver? Well, the interesting thing about the freshmen wide receivers as opposed to the freshman running backs is all of them were in spring camp. Bryce Yates, Cam Sapp, and Tony Kinsler all were part of spring practice. And that's an interesting sort of element, whereas only one of the freshman running backs was here during spring camp. All 3 freshman wide receivers enrolled early. So you have 10 scholarship wide receivers this year. You've got some injury questions right now with Sincere Lee and Raphael Williams. Neither one of those guys participated in spring camp. So that takes you down to 8 guys. 3 of those other 8 are true freshmen, but they were here in the spring, and they actually looked pretty good. I think Kinsler, Sapp, and Yates all looked pretty impressive. They all look sort of like the same guy, and that's been something that this coaching staff has done, is sort of recruited a lot of similar body types at wide receiver and running back to a certain extent. But wide receiver, a lot of the additions they've made, basically outside of Deuce Spann, have been sort of the same shape of guy. Raphael Williams, Sincere Lee, Kataris Hicks, Tony Kinsler, Cameron Sapp, Bryce Yates. They're all sort of the same. Kind of small, pretty fast, and that's it. Again, other than Deuce Spann. And you see it in the recruiting class, too. I mean, they have one bigger wide receiver, and then the rest are all smaller guys like this. This is what I don't know if it's what they prefer. I'm sure they'd like to have the guys who are 6'2" and run 4.4 40s or 4.35s or something like that. But those guys are a lot harder to get. And so given the choice between, and it's not this is being overly reductive, but given the choice between tall and slow and short and fast, they're going to go with the short and fast every day. And that's what they've gone with Lee, Williams, Hicks, Kinsler, Sapp, Yates, Andy Jean, who transferred for the spring and then left again after the spring. Even Tyreek Robinson, who they signed last year. Like, they'll take those smaller, faster guys, and that's what Kinsler, Sapp, and Yates, the true freshmen, are. Who's ahead out of that group? I don't know. I really like Tony Kinsler. But I think Yates and Sapp both looked impressive. Sapp got a lot of work on returning kicks and punts in spring camp, so he might have an in on the special team side of things. I wouldn't be surprised if all three of those guys play this year. I think they'll all get on the field in some capacity. I don't know if they'll all burn their red shirts, but I wouldn't be surprised if only one out of that group of three takes a red shirt. Like, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. I think you could see some contributions there. And certainly if there's an injury, I think you could see some contributions, but maybe even if there's not, I think you could see those guys get on the field and do something. So I'm not sure which one I would circle as being the most likely to contribute, but yeah, I think they're going to count on those freshmen or get something out of those freshmen this season, especially if, and I don't know if this will be the case or not, but especially if Sincere Lee and Raphael Williams, if their injuries last into the season at all. If they have to miss time during training camp or during the season, then Yates, Sapp, and Kinsler are almost definitely going to be getting playing time in those first few games. All right, questions from this week here. NC Panther 99 says, what have you heard regarding Michigan transfer Jeff Percy, who's slated for the all-important left tackle position, other than he's a giant? Did he show well at spring ball? Heard any talk about him since? So the O-line is interesting, and the O-line in terms, particularly of that left tackle position. That's the spot they had to fill through the transfer portal this offseason, and they brought in a couple guys to do it. And I think, they brought in three transfers, right? Jeff Percy, who you mentioned, Keith Gouveia, who's a guard who's coming from Richmond. And so, he's definitely a guard. He's not part of this conversation. The other one is Kendall Stanley, who's coming in from Charlotte. And Stanley and Percy both have experience playing tackle. Percy, I don't think started any games at Michigan, but he's gotten on the field a lot, special teams and as a reserve tackle. Stanley started a bunch of games at Charlotte at right tackle. And so it was really, I was curious to see how they were going to end up working this out, where you've got a couple guys who could play tackle, who have experience playing tackle, and you also have Ryan Baer coming back too. So who's going to end up being your two starting tackles? And what we saw in spring camp is that Ryan Baer is pretty entrenched, or looked to be entrenched, at right tackle, and Kendall Stanley and Jeff Percy were battling it out for that left tackle spot. So taking Stanley, who had played it on the right side at Charlotte, moving him over to left tackle, and creating a competition there. Now, what happened as spring camp progressed is Ryan Coretta, the redshirt sophomore, got hurt. And that's relevant. It was like late in camp, like right before the spring game, actually. That's relevant because Coretta was working as the backup center behind Lyndon Cooper. When he got hurt, the coaches took Keith Gouveia, who'd been working as the left guard, and moved him to backup center. When they did that, they took Kendall Stanley, who had been, again, working at left tackle, kind of alternating with Jeff Percy, battling with Jeff Percy, and they moved Stanley inside to left guard. Stanley apparently has the versatility to play guard or tackle. That's interesting because if Kendall Stanley ends up being one of the top five, I think it creates a better opportunity for him to be one of the top five and start, because he could play guard or tackle, whereas Percy seems to be just a tackle. Gouveia seems to be just a guard. Ryan Baer could probably play either one. BJ Williams seems to be just a guard. Lyndon Cooper's just an interior lineman, could be a center, could be a guard. There's some guys who are very much one or very much the other, and there are some guys with some flexibility, and Kendall Stanley showed he's got some flexibility. Now, I think the competition's still going to be him and Percy competing for that left tackle job. It seems like the coaches liked what Jeff Percy did at left tackle. I mean, part of that whole move with Kendall Stanley going inside to guard, that doesn't happen probably if Percy's not doing a good job at left tackle. You know what I mean? They're probably more likely to move somebody else up to left guard if Percy's not really standing out there. So that probably speaks well to him. But I think there's a long way to go there. And I'm really not sure. I'm not sure what it's going to look like. I'm pretty confident about, I would say 99% confident that Ryan Baer is going to start at right tackle. Lyndon Cooper is going to start at center. pretty high confidence, 75 to 80%, maybe more, that BJ Williams is going to start at right guard. It's really the left tackle and left guard positions that they have to figure out. And I think your three guys you're looking at there for those spots are Stanley, Percy, and Gouveia. With, again, Percy just as a tackle, Gouveia just as a guard, and then Stanley fitting in wherever he does. And it might come down to, if Kendall Stanley's one of the 5 best, and you consider him to be one of the 5 best, whether he's playing guard or tackle, then you wait and decide on his position based on what you see from Percy and Gouveia. Which one of those two fits in as one of the 5 best. And if all 3 of them are among the 5 best, then you start looking at Williams or Bear and decide if you want to drop one of those guys down to the second team. So, haven't heard a ton about Jeff Percy specifically, individually, but I think what they've done this year, and we've said this a bunch of times when talking about the transfer portal, I think they've added the right kinds of transfers to get their 5 best on the field, to give themselves more options when it comes to finding the 5 best, and then also more options when it comes to building the depth, which, as we all know, is what ultimately killed them last year. Is after Branson Taylor got hurt, their depth just was decimated. They didn't have the depth to fill in for Taylor once he got hurt. And it just started this shuffling around that just never went well. Let's see here. Parkview Prince wants to know any early read on potential NFL draft prospects from Pitt for this upcoming year. Let's see. I think there's a handful of guys. I think there's a handful of guys that you would be looking at. I think Desmond Reed is interesting. He's small, but look, he's shown some durability. He's obviously got the speed, and guys his size can play in the NFL. They're not the majority of running backs in the NFL, but guys his size can play in the NFL. So I think he's probably the top offensive guy. Like I say, Lyndon Cooper might get some looks. I think he might have a possibility of being an option, or getting an opportunity to play at the next level. And then, on defense, I think you have to be realistic about the fact that if Kyle Lewis and or Rasheem Biles do this year what they did last year, they're looking at being pretty high draft picks and probably not coming back. I don't want to rule anything out or guarantee anything, but I think those guys are very much NFL prospects, and I think they're, again, if they do what they did last year, if they even come close to matching their production from a year ago, they're going to be enticed to go out and leave and go to the NFL after their junior seasons. Biles is a true junior. Kyle Lewis is a redshirt junior this year. This might be their last year here if they come even, if they're anywhere in the neighborhood of what they did in 2024. So they might be, honestly, like Biles and Lewis might be the top draft prospects on this team in 2025. I really think, even though they're underclassmen. Because if they have that kind of season, if they get 15 tackles for loss and 6 or 7 sacks and a couple of interceptions again, I with no inside information whatsoever, I would have a hard time seeing them come back. They're on the track that leads to an early departure for the NFL. Now, fortunately, Pitt has recruited well at linebacker. They've developed well at linebacker. I think they've got the depth to bounce back from it, but I would say those guys are the probably 2 I would keep an eye on the most, plus Desmond Reed and Lyndon Cooper. Elsewhere in the seniors, I don't know if anybody really jumps out all that much. Guys could emerge, but just kind of going down the list, I'm not sure I see an obvious option as a draft pick. Guys could play themselves into it, but I don't really see anything jump out now. And among the underclassmen, Biles and Lewis are probably the top ones. So good question, and that'll be interesting to watch and keep an eye on as the season progresses. But I feel like those guys that we mentioned there, those 4, Reed, Cooper, Lewis, Biles, are probably going to be pretty good in 2025. So we'll keep an eye on them. But good question, and great questions all week. We got a couple left over. We'll try and get to those. Maybe we'll do a special Monday mailbag or something like that just to wrap up the questions that we have left over. That might be a good way to do it. We'll see about that. But one way or the other, thanks so much for watching the video today. I appreciate you watching these videos all week. A little bit of Pitt sports talk to get your day started. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And I think that's about it. I hope you had a great week. Enjoy your Friday. Have a great weekend, and we'll catch up with you on Monday for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.